weighing 250 pounds, Dick the Bruiser.
Chicago, because we're going to zero in on this date, September 1st, 1972. This is one of the greatest classics of all time, the cage match of this night.
This isn't your grandma's wrestling. Dick the Bruiser was a head-busting, rule-breaking, riot-starting legend. Let's just say he wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty or his opponents' faces. As a wrestler, Dick the Bruiser was a huge star in his time. He racked up an impressive 16 world championships during his career. This included big wins like the AWA World Heavyweight Championship and the WWA World Heavyweight Championship, which he held an incredible 13 times in the Indianapolis promotion. This dude was a beast, ex-NFL player, shaved head, and a glare that could melt steel. He wasn't just some fake wrestler, oh no. Bruiser hit hard, really hard. Bruiser was a force of nature who lived his gimmick 24/7. And to prove it, we're gonna rewind to one of the most infamous incidents in wrestling history, the Alex Karras bar brawl. This wild story about Bruiser involves a stage fight gone wrong. It was 1963, and Bruiser was set to have a match with Alex Karras, a football player for the Detroit Lions. To hype things up, they decided to have a fake fight at a bar owned by Karras. The idea was to make it look real, get people talking, and sell tickets to the match. But things went south when a relative of Karras' business partner saw the fight and thought it was real. He jumped in to defend Karras, and that's when all hell broke loose.
You know, he runs over, grabs a pool stick, and cracks Dick the Bruiser over the forehead with it. Splits open his forehead. Dick the Bruiser's going nuts, chasing him around the bar. Police officers come in. Dick the Bruiser's yelling and screaming like he would do, like a wrestler would do, right?
Bruiser, never one to back down, started throwing punches for real. The bar turned into a full-blown riot with over 300 people getting caught in the crossfire. Chairs flying, punches landing, and even the cops getting involved when they arrived. The bar was completely trashed, and Bruiser ended up facing assault charges and a huge fine. Now you'd think this kind of behavior would ruin someone's career, right? Well, not in this case. Sure, Bruiser got slapped with an aggravated assault charge and had to pay $50,000 in damages, but the incident only made him more famous. People couldn't get enough of the drama. The buzz around his upcoming wrestling match with Karras reached a fever pitch, and when the day finally came, fans packed the venue to see the clash. The whole debacle ended up making Dick the Bruiser's reputation as a no-nonsense, take no prisoners, tough guy who could explode at any moment. But that's just one story. Let's go back even further to 1957 for another wild chapter in Bruiser's career, the Madison Square Garden Riot. Now, if you know anything about wrestling, you know that Madison Square Garden is a legendary place, like the biggest stage you could imagine for a wrestler back then. That night, the place was packed with excited fans. Bruiser was teaming up with another tough guy, Dr. Jerry Graham, and they were going up against two real fan favorites, Antonino Rocca and Edouard Carpentier. The crowd was going absolutely bonkers, cheering for Rocca and Carpentier and booing Bruiser and Graham like crazy. You could just feel the tension in the air, like something was about to explode. And explode it did. When the match ended, you'd think everyone would calm down, but not Bruiser and Graham. They kept fighting even after the bell rang. The crowd just went wild. People started throwing chairs, jumping into the ring, and even fighting with each other. It was like the whole place turned into a crazy free-for-all. Things got so out of control that the police had to come in to break it up. Can you believe it took over 60 officers to finally get things under control? 2 policemen were even injured in the chaos, and Madison Square Garden was completely trashed. This wasn't just some little scuffle, it was a full-blown riot. And the New York State Athletic Commission was not happy. They decided to ban Dick the Bruiser from wrestling in New York, and that ban lasted for years. This was a huge deal because, like I said, Madison Square Garden was the biggest stage in wrestling. But don't you dare feel sorry for Bruiser, because even though he was banned, the riot actually made Bruiser even more famous. Fans loved him because he was so unpredictable and exciting. You never knew what he was going to do next. And that made him one of the most talked about wrestlers in the business. One more thing that made Bruiser so unique was his tendency to work stiff. In wrestling, most moves are choreographed to look painful while actually minimizing the risk of injury to the performers. It's a bit like a dance, with both wrestlers cooperating to tell a story of combat. But Bruiser didn't always play by these rules. He was known to throw real punches, headbutts, and forearms, leaving his opponents bruised and battered. This approach, while exciting for the fans, often led to tension backstage. Many wrestlers resented Bruiser's rough tactics, and real fights would sometimes break out behind the scenes. Bruiser's fiery temper and unpredictable nature meant that a planned wrestling match could quickly escalate into a genuine brawl. But this unpredictability was also a major part of his appeal. Fans loved the sense of danger and realism that he brought to his matches. They couldn't be sure what would happen next, and this kept them on the edge of their seats. Bruiser's wild behavior wasn't just an act. He was a tough guy in real life, always ready for a fight, whether it was in the ring, a bar, or even the parking lot. But he was also a shrewd showman who understood the power of blurring the lines between reality and performance. Looking back, it's clear that Dick the Bruiser's career was as chaotic as it was legendary. Whether he was tearing up a bar, starting a riot, or hitting someone a little too hard in the ring, he left an unforgettable impression on wrestling history. Sadly, our favorite wrestler died on November 10th, 1991 in Largo.
Tonight, he is dead at age 62. He was a man who seemed larger than life both in and out of the wrestling ring. And tonight, Hendrix Brandy profiles a person who helped to start the pro wrestling craze.
The world's most dangerous wrestler, Dick the Bruiser! For over 3 decades, he ruled pro wrestling. A huge man, even at 5'10", Dick the Bruiser towered over opponents and put big...
Even at 62 years old, he was still unbelievably strong and dedicated to his fitness. He wasn't just someone who casually hit the gym. He was a lifelong athlete who pushed himself hard. Sadly, that dedication led to a tragic accident. During a particularly intense workout, Bruiser ruptured a blood vessel in his esophagus. This isn't something that happens every day. It's a rare injury that can occur when someone lifts very heavy weights, especially while holding their breath. In Bruiser's case, the intense pressure from his workout caused a blood vessel to rupture. This led to massive internal bleeding. The problem with this type of bleeding is that it's not always obvious right away. The news of Bruiser's death sent shockwaves through the wrestling world. He was seen as almost indestructible, a force of nature who could withstand anything. The idea that he could be taken down by something as routine as lifting weights was hard to grasp. Even legends have a beginning. Before the world knew the indestructible Bruiser, there was a young man making his own path. I think you need to hear about him.
Compared to when you first started wrestling in the 50s?
Well, when I started wrestling in the 50s, it's exactly like it is today. There was a lot of show business. In fact, that's how I became popular in wrestling, Karen. There was a lot of show business in wrestling. That was Gorgeous George era. And he had curls, and he would come out and throw gold hair clips at people. And all the wrestlers followed his lead.
Dick Afflis wasn't born a star, but he had something even better: determination. Growing up in Delphi, Indiana, Dick's early life was simple and small town, but everything changed during World War II. His mom found work in Indianapolis, and the family packed up and moved. It was here in a bigger city that Dick began to discover his love for sports. At Shortridge High School, he joined the football team as a freshman. Even as a young teenager, Dick had that spark, that drive to compete and push himself. He kept playing through his sophomore year, showing real potential. But life wasn't always easy. When his mom lost her job, the family had to move back to Delphi. For Dick, this was more than just a move, it was a roadblock. His new school didn't have a football team. Imagine being a kid who lives and breathes sports, only to have the thing you love most taken away. But Dick wasn't the kind of person to sit around and feel sorry for himself. He made a bold decision. He packed up again and moved to Lafayette, Indiana, where he stayed at the YMCA. Why? because it allowed him to attend Lafayette Jefferson High School, a place where he could play football and even join the wrestling team. Living away from home as a teenager wasn't easy, but Dick thrived. He threw himself into both sports and became a standout athlete. This wasn't just about playing a game for him, it was about proving to himself and everyone else that he could overcome anything. After high school, Dick wasn't ready to stop. He went to Purdue University to play football, but before long he transferred to the University of Nevada, Reno.
He graduated from there, I assume?
No, he didn't.
He didn't.
He only went there 3 years.
What happened?
Well, he went there to play football.
Yeah.
You know, and in his 3rd year, he got kicked off the team.
Uh-oh.
At Reno, he kept playing football and worked nights as a bouncer at a nightclub to make ends meet. Being a bouncer wasn't glamorous, but it toughened him up even more. Breaking up bar fights and handling rowdy customers, it suited Dick just fine. Then came 1951, which was a turning point in Dick's life. He was drafted into the NFL. Imagine the thrill of hearing your name called, knowing you're going to play professional football. Dick joined the Green Bay Packers as a lineman and played for 4 seasons. He never missed a single game, appearing in all 48 regular season matchups during his career. The Packers weren't a great team at the time. They struggled to win games and never ranked high in the standings, but Dick stood out. He was tough, reliable, and gritty, the kind of player you could count on in every play. But the game wasn't kind to him. One day, Dick took a hard hit to his throat, damaging his vocal cords. It left him with a permanently gravelly voice. Most people would have seen this as a setback, but for Dick, it would later become part of his larger-than-life persona. By 1954, Dick was ready for something new. Football had been good to him, but he was drawn to the world of professional wrestling. It wasn't just a career change, it was a leap into the unknown. Wrestling wasn't like football. It wasn't just about strength, it was about personality, showmanship, and connecting with the audience. Dick trained under Vern Gagne, one of the greats, who taught him how to combine his natural toughness with the craft of wrestling. Before long, Dick Afflis became Dick the Bruiser. The name fit him perfectly. He was loud, brash, and unstoppable. In 1955, he started wrestling in Chicago, where he faced some of the biggest names in the sport, including Gagne and Luthez. The matches were tough, but Dick had something special. He didn't just fight, he put on a show. Fans couldn't get enough of him. By the late 1950s, Dick the Bruiser was a star, especially in Detroit. Every Thursday night, fans tuned in to live TV to watch him destroy his opponents. He had a routine: step into the ring, dominate the match, and leave the crowd cheering for more. His matches were brutal, showcasing his raw power and no-nonsense style. But it wasn't just his matches that fans loved. It was his personality. That gravelly voice, a result of his old football injury, made him sound like he'd been through 1,000 battles. His fiery interviews only added to his tough guy image. He was larger than life, a character straight out of a storybook, and fans loved every second of it. Of course, even Dick the Bruiser had his share of challenges. One of his most memorable live TV matches ended in a surprising loss to Cowboy Bob Ellis. It was a rare defeat, but if there was one thing fans knew about Dick, it was that he didn't stay down for long. He came back stronger, beating Ellis in 2 rematches held at Detroit's Olympia Arena. Then in 1964, Dick the Bruiser made a big decision that would change the wrestling scene in Indianapolis. Along with his friend and fellow wrestler Wilbur Snyder, Dick bought the local Indianapolis NWA wrestling promotion from its longtime owner, Jim Barnett. The two had a vision for the promotion and wanted to make it their own. Dick wasted no time putting his stamp on it. He renamed it the World Wrestling Association, WWA, a name that sounded big, bold, and important, just like Dick himself. Dick wasn't shy about making himself the star of his own show. He crowned himself the WWA champion, a move that might seem a little egotistical, but in wrestling, it's part of the game. The WWA was his playground, and he was the king of it. The promotion had its own champions, its own storylines, and its own fan base. But even though the WWA was independent, Dick made a smart move by working with the much larger American Wrestling Association, AWA, which was run by another wrestling legend, Verne Gagne. This partnership helped both promotions thrive. They would share wrestlers, recognize each other's championships, and put on exciting shows that drew in fans from all over. One of the most exciting parts of Dick's career was his partnership with another larger-than-life wrestler, the Crusher. Together, they formed one of the most popular and dominant tag teams of the era. They won the AWA World Tag Team Championship 5 times, thrilling fans with their brawling, no-nonsense style. To add some fun to the story, the Crusher was billed as Dick's cousin, even though they weren't actually related. Wrestling has always been about storytelling, and this little twist made their team even more memorable. During his time running the WWA, Dick also helped create some unforgettable moments and characters. One of his most lasting contributions was giving a young, cocky wrestling manager named Bobby Heenan the nickname The Weasel. Fans loved to boo Heenan, and the nickname became one of the most famous in wrestling history. It's still remembered today as part of Heenan's legacy. For years, the WWA was a strong and successful promotion, running from 1964 all the way until 1989. But as time went on, the wrestling world began to change. The World Wrestling Federation, run by Vince McMahon, was growing fast. It was becoming a nationwide phenomenon, signing the best talent, getting the biggest TV deals, and drawing fans away from smaller promotions like the WWA. By the late 1980s, it was clear that the wrestling landscape was no longer what it had been when Dick first started. He decided it was time to step away, and in 1989, the WWA officially closed its doors. Even as the WWA came to an end, Dick's wrestling career was filled with highlights. In 1971, for example, he teamed up with another wrestling legend, The Sheik, to challenge for the WWF Tag Team Championship. They faced off against Crazy Luke Graham and Tarzan Tyler in a hard-fought match. Although Dick and The Sheik didn't win, it was still an exciting chapter in his career and showed just how much of a presence he had in the wrestling world. But Dick the Bruiser wasn't just a wrestler. He was a larger-than-life personality who captured the hearts of fans, especially in Indianapolis. With his tough guy persona, gravelly voice, and undeniable charisma, he became a local hero. People admired him not just for what he did in the ring, but for who he was outside of it. He lived in Indianapolis, on the northwest side of the city, and was a part of the community. One of his biggest fans was a young Indianapolis native named David Letterman. Years later, when Letterman became a famous talk show host, he paid tribute to Dick the Bruiser in a unique way. He named his show's band the World's Most Dangerous Band, which was a playful nod to Dick's famous nickname, the World's Most Dangerous Wrestler. It was a small but meaningful way of showing just how much of an impact Dick had on people who grew up watching him. Dick's influence even extended to Detroit rock radio in the 1980s. A radio personality named George Beyer created a character called Richard T. Bruiser, which was an impersonation of Dick. The impersonation became popular, and Dick himself joined in on the fun, appearing in TV commercials for the station. These ads showcased his sense of humor and his willingness to laugh at himself, which only made fans love him more. Even after he retired from wrestling, Dick stayed involved in the business. He became a color commentator for the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, Glow, a women's wrestling promotion founded by David McLane. McLane had started his career working for the WWA under Dick's guidance, so it was a full-circle moment for both of them. Dick also worked as a talent agent for World Championship Wrestling, helping to scout and develop new stars. In 1990, he even stepped back into the spotlight as a special guest referee for the main event at Starrcade, one of WCW's biggest shows of the year. Dick's personal life was quieter, but no less important to him. He was married to Louise, and together they raised their family. He also had an adopted son, John Carney, who spent a lot of time with him. His son-in-law, who wrestled under the name Dick the Bruiser Jr., carried on the family tradition by competing in the independent wrestling circuit. Sadly, Dick's life was cut short in 1991. On November 10th, while weightlifting at home with John, he suffered a ruptured blood vessel in his esophagus. The injury caused internal bleeding, and he passed away later that day at Suncoast Hospital in Largo, Florida, near his winter home. His wife Louise shared the heartbreaking news, and fans around the world mourned the loss of one of wrestling's true legends. Dick the Bruiser's legacy lives on to this day. He wasn't just a wrestler, he was an entertainer, a storyteller, and a symbol of an era when wrestling was gritty, raw, and full of larger-than-life characters. For the fans who watched him during his prime, he wasn't just a character on TV. He was a hero, someone who could take on anyone and come out on top. Dick the Bruiser may be gone, but the impact he made on wrestling and on his fans will never be forgotten. His story is a reminder of how one person, with enough passion and determination, can create something truly unforgettable. If you enjoyed this story about Dick the Bruiser and his incredible wrestling career, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos covering wrestling legends and their amazing legacies. Let us know in the comments who you'd like us to talk about next. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.